Hello, I'm the War Nerd, and this video you might have noticed on my channel I was doing some live streaming before, um, basically just redesigning my portfolio, which is the glitchy sort of weirdness you see before you at the minute. So I thought I'd just talk a little bit about how I've approached that, what I've used, why I've done this, and also just talk a bit about that, why I made design decisions, etc., etc. Because I thought that would be quite interesting, I guess. So I've just decided to really. My portfolio before was it was just a WordPress site. I wanted to make something a bit more customized, and also at the minute I wanted to really start looking into Tailwind CSS, which is like a new CSS framework that's gaining a lot of popularity at the minute. So I wanted to try building something with that. So I decided to make like a sort of splash screen for the index.html. So like I said, I made this sort of HTML CSS. There's no JavaScript, it's just literally HTML and CSS. So yeah, this is just a little splash screen, I guess, basically. And I created this. I've been messing around a bit before with like 3D cubes using CSS. So I wanted to give this overall portfolio sort of weird, sort of glitch aesthetic, I suppose. Hence why I've added this element. And then you've got some sort of glitch effects in the text here as well, and then the sort of crazy background. In some respects, I think some people will probably think this is a bit too much, but I just wanted to inject a bit of my own like aesthetic preferences into the portfolio, I suppose. So this is just like a splash screen on the mobile. You should be able to see it. Just it's sort of responsive, so there you go. You get that instead on mobile, instead of this. In general, I think it's sort of okay. I've been working on this bit a bit more, but like it's sort of. I'll talk a bit more about how Tailwind's been as well, actually, in terms of using that, which is new for me. And it's sort of. Anyway, let's just go into the portfolio itself. So there's this splash screen. I've added these sort of rotating cube bits with various GIFs playing on each face, and this is just background. Let's just go into the actual portfolio itself. So the portfolio is pretty straightforward, really. I just wanted to simplify everything a bit more. We've got a navigation menu here, a little description of what I do, a picture of me looking like a member of the Rolling Stones or something. But I thought that was quite a funny picture. Cool picture as well. It's with a bandana tie, actually a tie. Out of this like sort of circle picture, so there's a little representation of me. A little bit of a description. This is something I've seen a lot on other people's portfolios, just a quick summing up of skills. So there's just like these circles, and then I just wanted to dive right into it. So I've got selected projects. It's not everything I've done, but just a selection of some interesting projects like A-frame projects, React applications, WordPress sites, Free.js work, Play Canvas 3D, WebGL stuff. Also interactive fiction, so just basically like a wide smattering of basically stuff I do or have done in the past, like and then a bit of background on where I work and all these links below. So it's pretty simple, really, and then you can just scroll to each if you just click on there. Like I said, it's all done with HTML CSS. I think some people might think that glitchy weird background is sort of a bit too much, and maybe the way that I've contained this content with the equal side margins is maybe a bit old-fashioned, but I don't know. I only did it over 2 days, so it's not. And like I said, sort of using Tailwind as well, which is new for me. So this is mobile responsive as well. So if we go to mobile view, you can see that it's sort of everything is responsive. So the layout changes So Tailwind, so the second part of this video, I guess I'll just talk about my experience with Tailwind. So it's quite interesting to work with as a sort of CSS framework. It feels wrong though at first. Oh, it feels a bit wrong at first because basically all your HTML ends up looking like this. And now I know that this is just, obviously I've been prototyping this quite fast, so there are ways of reducing all these, like what looks like inline styling. The main criticism that's been put to Tailwind is this, so that it basically uglifies your markup, makes it look really ugly. So I've got breakpoints here, like for small, and medium, and large, etc., etc. So there's different behaviours based on what the width of the screen. But there are ways around. You can reduce this apparently. Like you can specify like a button component, and then you apply these certain classes. So basically with Tailwind, let me just get it up actually if I can find it. With Tailwind, you basically got these utility classes which you can just apply. So let's talk about that a bit basically. So like for example, if I wanted to make a custom button with red background and white text, I'd do something like let's say I was creating a button. Let's do an example here. Do button class, and I think it's something, I'm still learning some of the class names actually, like something like background red, text white. Now this sort of goes against everything that we've been traditionally meant to do with CSS. We're supposed to have reusable classes that you can apply and everywhere, not having these like more, really long class lists of utilities. So like, but I'd say from just working with this a bit, in terms of getting something like this up and running, which is like a one page, well 2 pages technically, but basically the meat of it is this page. To get something up and running like this is pretty easy for these sort of projects, so maybe it has a real use case for like smaller sizes. I don't know what it would be like in a larger scenario where you've got a large code base. That might present up trouble unless you've I don't know, got experiences of using it in the best possible way. Like I said, I don't know if I'm using it all Tailwind in the best possible way at the minute. I'm just sort of, this is literally the first 2 days of using it. But it's powerful in the sense that you can get something like this up and running without having to code tons and tons. Like if I was going to do this from scratch using CSS, I'd have to write all the, well, just have to write it from scratch, and then for the responsiveness I'm going to have to put out media queries or something like that. I don't know, I mean, I guess it's personal preference. I mean, the guy who made Cube CSS actually wrote a post on it recently saying basically it's preference, which I found quite interesting. And I've sort of, I mean, for people who don't write much CSS, it's probably very useful, I guess. Like I have got a background in CSS, but some degree of writing CSS, but I just did want to try this out still. And in terms of, I mean, but essentially you have to be sort of familiar with existing CSS paradigms and CSS like grid and flex and stuff like that to actually get the most out of it, to be honest. So I mean, the sort of feeling I got from it is it's just like shortcuts to just doing stuff that you can do already with CSS. So I think for some people they're not going to really get the benefit of it because they already know CSS. So if you already know CSS, why would you need just a bunch of shortcut classes, which can also often end up looking like this in some cases, whereas you could probably define all that in a single class in CSS traditionally. So it's like width 80, height 24, etc., etc. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot more code will be written this way soon, because I think Tailwind's sort of gaining a lot of popularity at the minute. This experiment I've done with it's been sort of interesting, just to get my head around it. I mean, I think for creating a sort of static site like this, which is just not the only thing we're ever going to have to change on here, is possibly adding new projects, maybe updating information, but it's not hard. Basically, editing some content. But I think for those sorts, like smaller sort of sites like this, where it's sort of got a very specific use, it was very useful in terms of like just being able to. I did this, like I said, I did this over 2 days. It works like for mobile quite nicely. This would have, because usually this sort of thing where you've got like a complicated CSS object here, element here, and then this thing on the right, it's just a flex that's just like 50-50. And then if I add in the breakpoint for this, it's sort of nice. So that was quite easy. Well, it wasn't easy, that's actually the hardest bit to work out on the mobile side of things for this page. But doing that with CSS would have not been an absolute nightmare. It would have just been like something like when you get to the breakpoint, display none on the cube, and basically set some width or something on the, or a different element type on this text part. But it certainly makes it sort of intuitive and quick, I'd say, using Tailwind, because you just have to, as soon as you start to understand and remember what all the class names are for the utility class, it sort of becomes quite an intuitive process in terms of like actually designing and prototyping. Like, I didn't work from an initial design, I just sort of worked out the box and did whatever. So I found it quite useful in that sense for prototyping. Anyway, I thought I'd just leave it at that. Tailwind CSS, basic opinion on it at the minute is it doesn't replace CSS, obviously. I mean, CSS is its own language and it can be very powerful. I mean, this still does use CSS in some places as well. I've sort of used a mixed approach as well, because obviously for the cube, that's basically sort of iteration of that thing I did for the cube, the 3D dice thing, and then I've just well, funnily enough, to get the actual spinning behavior, I think I used one of the Tailwind classes. I just want, like, and that's in terms of the look, I guess it's so crazy, but anyway, I think I'll just leave it at that. I mean, Tailwind is quite interesting. It seems to have divided opinion a lot in the community, the developer community, but I think it can be useful in some cases, definitely, especially for something like this where it's prototyping. Anyway, I've been Noir Nerd. Like and subscribe. Like if you like it, because it helps the algorithm, me going up further in the YouTube sphere, I guess, in the algorithm. So like it if you like it. Hope that's been interesting in some fashion. Alright, bye.